So I want to introduce to you Christoph Schultz, who will be coming here shortly. Christoph is the Executive Director for Light of the World, whose mandate, what a great mandate, is to bring electricity to families in areas where the grid does not reach them. And what a great endeavor, what a great thing to be a part of. Prior to joining Light of the World, Christoph worked in various areas of international development, including microfinance. He teaches here at Calgary. He's lived, studied, and worked just about everywhere, including North America, Central America, South America, so we can say the Americas overall. Asia, Africa, and Europe. I'm not sure you've missed too many continents. He has a Bachelor of Commerce from right here at Pasquay, and he has a Master's of Science in Development Economics and Public Policy from the University of Manchester. Please join me in welcoming Christoph Schultz.
Thank you, David. Can everyone hear me okay as well? Yes? Great. So yeah, thank you, first of all, David, to the ConocoPhilips IRIS Seminar series and to the Center for Corporate Sustainability for the invitation to speak here today about an interesting transition that the organization that I'm the Executive Director of, Light of the World, has embarked on to social enterprise. Although the off-grid lighting world, often being in Alberta, we feel quite distant from the world that Light of the World is focused on and working in, as David mentioned. I do think it's an appropriate time and fortunately a bit timely to speak about solar in Alberta. Maybe if it was 3 or 4 years ago, it would have felt a little bit different. But things, you are hearing more about solar in the media. There obviously is, policy that is being developed, as well as other efforts that are, really raising, the profile of this energy technology that's available. Light Up the World has been around for almost 20 years now, and we've seen what the difference that solar can make for quite a bit of time. And I would also say that, in terms of you do feel like there's a bit of an energy transition that's happening globally. There definitely is momentum, happening around it. And I think the off-grid lighting sector, which is what Light Up the World is involved in, it has actually played, its own small role in making that happen. So again, happy to be here speaking at this time. To you all, thanks again for coming. And at this time where, again, it's interesting times for a nonprofit organization to be embarking on a transition. So I'd like to start by just giving a bit of an overview of the presentation, the main points that I'll be talking about. So first of all, I want to talk about the transition from nonprofit to social enterprise. I want to talk about the rationale for why these entities even exist. So why would a nonprofit even exist, and why social enterprise? So also clarify a few definitions, because a lot of times terms are thrown around and sometimes they don't necessarily mean as much. So I want to, for the sake of this presentation, define that. I will be talking about the off-grid lighting sector. So I started to mention that already. That's, as David mentioned, it's about electrification in areas where the grid hasn't arrived. That's what the sector is about. I will speak about the sector, how it existed when we started back in 1997, and then also the evolution that's happened to bring it to where it is today. So 2016, those changes that have happened, and then talk about the implications from that and how Light Up the World, LUTW, is responding to those changes, essentially initiating the transition as an organization. And lastly, get into some conclusions. I have to be honest, in terms of a transition, we are not a social enterprise right now. Maybe under certain definitions you could consider that we are. We have just started the process. And so it's something that we're navigating at the moment, and that's more what I'm going to be speaking to. So the conclusions are more about that, and not a final conclusion that this is, it's a complete process. So I just want to give you that caveat with that there. So let's start with nonprofits and social enterprise, and just some clarifications. And even myself, I've worked in the sector for almost 15 years, the nonprofit sector, and I get lost in the definition sometimes in the terminology. So there's NGOs, there's aid organizations, there's humanitarian organizations, charities, development organizations. It's what I essentially mean here when I'm talking about nonprofit and the transition from nonprofit to social enterprise is entities that operate fundamentally where they provide a subsidy. So it's organizations that have a social purpose where the work that they're doing is not done on a private basis, essentially. So that's, hopefully that's clear from this point. Sometimes I might say NGO, I might say NPO. I'll try to keep it to nonprofit, but that's what I mean when I'm talking about nonprofit to social enterprise. By social enterprise, I mean a social-driven business or a purpose-driven business. And there I'm talking about subsidies not being involved. It's about profitability. Whether you want to call it profitability or a surplus, essentially it's about an organization that is fundamentally sustainable and that is carrying out an activity again to mainly achieve a social purpose. They're not paying dividends out, not making anyone rich necessarily, but they are. In terms of the distinction, they're not providing services with a subsidy. So hopefully that provides a bit of clarity between those two entities and in terms of the presentation and how I'll be speaking at them. So why do they exist? We can say, why does a nonprofit exist? We know about Doctors Without Borders. About organizations like CARE, World Vision, or social enterprises that can do different work. Tom's Shoes. Why do they exist? Well, fundamentally, these organizations exist because there's a gap in services. There's a gap in the environments that we work in, and either depending on your ideology, I guess political ideology, you could say. Either the market hasn't performed, the market is unaware that this opportunity exists and is not providing the service or the product which people are demanding and have the ability to acquire. Or you could also say that it's public sector failure. For instance, some locations where we work as well, where you have a large number of children that maybe lack access to education, or the education system isn't serving them very well. So informal education provided by a nonprofit. I'm not sure if any of you have heard of BRAC, a very large nonprofit organization that specializes in informal education, is bridging a gap because the government is not providing that service. Microfinance institutions step in when the banks don't want to do lending. Here sometimes you have money lenders who offer very high interest loans. Obviously they're not doing it on a nonprofit basis, but they're also filling that role. So I just want to again lay the foundation of why do organizations exist from the start, and why would one organization choose to be a nonprofit over a social enterprise in a particular circumstance. And actually an organization, even if we're talking about microfinance, for instance, you could have both. You could have a microfinance institution in Mexico where a nonprofit could start up operations to provide that financial service. Maybe they would offer lower interest, and at the same time, a social enterprise could do the same thing and offer offer those services for a higher rate interest where they're able to cover their costs. So the needs can actually be the same, which stimulate both types of entities to respond and to take action essentially. So why did we become to exist? Why was LUTW? Why was Light Up the World established at the start? Essentially it was about gaps in electrification. So at the time when the organization started. Again in '97 when there was a smaller global population, but actually a larger global population that didn't have access to electricity, the main way of providing electricity was through grid extension. There was not there was some microgrids that could have been constructed using diesel generators, using other distributed power generation technologies. But essentially, Light Up the World, the founder of Light Up the World saw that, well, there's a lot of people that are living without light, without electricity. And what happens when they don't have electricity? Well, they burn kerosene or candles, or they find some other way of getting a basic light service. And so interestingly, at the time Light Up the World was founded, well, just before, because this really was the impetus to Light Up the World starting, was an advancement in LED technology. So when that happened in 1997, the founder of Light Up the World realized this. He was doing a sabbatical in Nepal and realized that with LEDs, with the advancements to make them white and bright enough to be used for illumination, that he could provide, or potentially you could provide, a reasonable amount of illumination to get rid of kerosene, to get rid of candles. So Light Up the World at that point said, essentially took the decision to initiate operations, start to design really basic LED lights that on a nonprofit basis, so on a subsidy basis, because it was really being piloted at that point in time, could be brought to people so they wouldn't have to use kerosene. That's basically what happened, and that was how the organization started. In the beginning, we started at the University of Calgary. We weren't sending people to countries all over the world. The model was to design the technology, sell it essentially at cost, not covering the operation, the cost of staff and other overhead costs. So there was a subsidy involved there. So basically, as a nonprofit, so that two other organizations, so that they could implement the technology directly. So anyway, I just want to start with the background on, okay, why do nonprofits and social enterprises exist? Because there's gaps, and in our case, the gap was rural electrification. There were not a lot of tools out there other than grid extension. So what is the off-grid lighting sector? So this is the space that we're in. And essentially it's, again, as David described, it's to serve the electricity needs of families that are in rural, remote areas that tend to have low incomes, and they're using fuel-based lighting. So the sector really was kicked off to focus on that need, on that lighting service, which didn't exist. So in the sector, back in '97, it was not a lot of organizations, but now it's come to be a number of companies and different organizations that are manufacturing products and that are being essentially service companies to provide that service, that are bringing solar systems with LED lighting to families where that service doesn't exist, where the grid has not arrived. So again, when we started in '97, there was more than 2 billion people. I remember from our website when I started with the organization, we used to have roughly a third of humanity does not have access to electricity. The demand was huge. The supply in terms of organizations that were meeting the need was very minimal. So there was only a handful of organizations, service companies that were doing this kind of work. There wasn't a lot of products available. Light Up the World was one of the main organizations that was developing products. So again, it was the LED light that was integrated with solar power and a battery to provide a basic lighting service. And in our context, when people didn't have electricity, what they were doing was they were turning to kerosene. They were turning to candles. As bad as kerosene is for lighting, and not to, kerosene is great, when you're flying a plane. Using it for lighting, it's not so great. One of the advantages of it is you can buy kerosene by the milliliter, and so in communities, in remote areas, if they have $1, they can be spending that dollar. If they have $2, they can be spending that amount to buy the quantity. So it's the incrementality of kerosene and candles which makes it affordable for people. And although in '97, when the organization started, LEDs were super efficient, they could be integrated combined with solar, but the cost of the technology represented an investment which was unfeasible for people. It wasn't possible to come up with $100, $200, $300 to buy a system, even though if you look at what it would have cost them over a year time and what they were spending on kerosene, it still could have represented a saving. So when the organization started, I would very much argue, and I know it's 20 years a bit later, but the nonprofit model made sense. There wasn't the products, there wasn't the foundation for the market to even exist. Now that, as I alluded to earlier, has changed significantly. So the off-grid lighting market and sector in 2016 is very, very different. Obviously, it's changed over time. It hasn't gone, in terms of some of the points I've outlined here, the market drivers, those haven't changed overnight. But a number of these very key factors have totally changed the landscape. So first of all, the dropping price of solar PV modules, solar panels. As you can see from this chart here, it shows initially 1977 where panels were roughly in the $70 a watt range, which is typically how solar panels are priced. And now, unfortunately, we don't buy panels at this price. This is more for manufacturers, but the estimated cost is roughly 30 cents per watt per module. I know companies that are working here, again, they're not getting them for that price exactly. We are getting our panels for about $1 a watt, and it was around 2008, 2009 when there was large-scale manufacturing that started to happen in China because there was a lot of policy incentives coming out of places like Germany, Spain, Japan, Australia, that the manufacturing shift to China basically is what has led to the drop in solar panel costs. So it was a certain period there, again, between 2008 2009, where the price went from $2 a watt to $1 a watt, which completely changed the economics of solar. And for off-grid solar in particular, though, as some of you probably have heard and may be very, very aware of, that it's also changing the economics around solar viability for centralized power generation as well. So that was a huge change, was a dropping of solar PV module prices. Energy efficient lighting advancements. So as I mentioned, Light Up the World started because of the advancement in LED technology. It was that change which basically led to the founding of the organization. Innovative finance tools. This came from the proliferation of microfinance even. So more and more organizations throughout the world. I'm not sure if some of you have heard of organizations like the Grameen Bank, which have also grown significantly since the 70s, but even more so recently, which are offering finance as a tool to people to acquire solar home systems so that they can give up their kerosene wick lamps and stop buying candles for light. So innovative finance tools have changed the off-grid lighting sector significantly. Continued growth of cell phone use. This is, one of the adoption of cell phones is one of the incredible stories of the developing world. And I still find it a bit funny sometimes to be in areas where you may see someone that doesn't have shoes. You'll see them. They might have ripped clothing even and look like someone that doesn't have a lot of resources. And yet they've got a cell phone. Sometimes they have two, they might even have three. And they're getting calls, and they have the technology and have adopted the technology and use it for so many things. So this is another aspect which has significantly contributed to the changes in the off-grid landscape. A big part of this is, although we're Light Up the World, we could also be like, the name could be, Talk Up the World. That's a horrible name, but there are homes that we work in where definitely the cell phone is actually even more important than lighting. So energy needs, how they're changing, is also a very big part of the changing landscape in the off-grid lighting sector. And lastly, one change which has come about in recent years, which I'll focus on a little bit more and go into a bit more detail on, is pay-as-you-go, which is essentially prepaid. Started from prepaid cell phone cards. It's no different than that. You top up your credit, You can talk on the phone. When your credit runs out, you can't talk anymore. The integration of pay-as-you-go with small-scale solar has completely changed the landscape. So what is it? As I just mentioned, it started with cell phone usage, prepaid cell phone cards, and essentially it's a chip which is integrated into a basic solar home system, which looks like this. I guess I should describe this a little bit. This is your light, and to the left there is basically a battery box. So that has a lithium battery inside. It has your battery management system. You can connect everything to it. Your solar panel is also connected to that battery box. And within that box, the pay-as-you-go chip is inside. And what it essentially does, similar to cell phones, is when your credit runs out, the system shuts off. You can't use it. And you might say, well, that's maybe not that great for people, but it actually has very key implications, which I'll talk about in a little bit more detail. So how does pay-as-you-go system actually work? It can work in a few different ways, but here, this highlights one way that it's most commonly being adopted. On the left-hand side, you have the customer. This is someone who doesn't have electricity, they're living off-grid, they have a home, they live in a town where they have shops where they normally go to top up their cell phone, because a lot of people actually do, they live that way where they are paying for cell phone credit in that way. They're buying rice, they're buying oil, they're buying their basic supplies. That local agent can also sell them solar credit, essentially. So they go to that agent, they, again, in the same amounts that they were purchasing kerosene, they can pay $1, they can pay $2, they can pay $3. That agent will give them a code. That code, as you can see here, there's a cloud, so things get complicated. It's depending on who you're working with. Essentially, that code is generated from, in this case, a pay-as-you-go service provider. So through that code, essentially, there is, that. Sorry, I should step back a bit. When the user goes back to their home and enters in that code, their system essentially kicks in again. The system knows that there's credit on the system, whether it's for a day, whether it's for a week, whether it's for a month, whether it's the next kilowatt hour, the system knows that they have purchased that credit. The cloud accounting system kicks into the renewable energy side. I mean, the panel actually will continue charging the battery regardless. The panel, which is connected to the system, which has, in this case, it has LUMeter, that's the company that we're working with. Their meter, which is integrated into that battery package that I mentioned, and that meter, which recognizes that the credit is there, turns on the lights again. And so that person, from that point, can turn on their lights, essentially, and then have the service for the next period of time, again, whether it's a day, a week, a month, or the next kilowatt hour. Not much different than how we pay for electricity, although our power doesn't shut off every time in between paying credit. So something that might not be too popular with us, but in the off-grid world, this is hugely important. Looks like I might need power. I'm not sure for the. Let's hope this doesn't shut off me. Let's keep going. So why is pay-as-you-go a disruptive technology? Which it is. So of the 5 drivers that I mentioned, this is, this couldn't have happened. Well, I guess it's arguable. The cost of solar PV modules dropping, LED technology, the other developments that have happened are hugely important. This is I would argue, the biggest development in terms of mass adoption of solar worldwide. And it is disruptive because it mitigates the long-standing barriers to finance. So even in areas where someone's living in a community, they don't have financial services, they can now get these systems without a microfinance institution. They don't have to go to the moneylender anymore. They don't have to go to whoever else it is in the community that they were getting the financial services from. The financial services are directly in the system, essentially, through that incremental purchasing. Secondly, it provides the incentive to pay. I can tell you from the way that we work as an organization, so again, we're a nonprofit organization. The way that we've implemented projects to date is through a subsidy. So what that means is when families acquire a system, they pay an equipment cost, but they pay an amount for the system, but it's not equivalent to the full cost of providing the system to them. So there is a subsidy. I think there was, is there power? Try. But essentially, I can keep. There we go. We have a power shortage. At least this is still working. So, no, but related to the incentive to pay, this is very significant. I can tell you that from areas where we work, where again people make contributions for systems. We do provide the option to finance systems over time. We typically allow families to pay for systems in 3 installments. Even though there is a subsidy, they pay at the time the system's installed, they pay after 3 months, they pay after 6 months. I can tell you that non-payment is a bit of a challenge at times. And so with the system shutting off, families not being able to use the service, it sounds a bit harsh, possibly. I'm not sure what your opinions are. It can sound cruel. But if you want sustainability of the approach, you need to have the incentive to pay. Because if not, you're only going to reach a very few number of people. And the entire program, the entire initiative that you're working on is not going to work very well. I used to work in microfinance, microbanking. And the people that usually would not pay actually were usually the people that had the most money. So it's not actually a reflection of poverty per se, but it is something that, again, is just very important for the technology. Another thing that it does is it actually de-risks and provides information for organizations. With many systems that we install in homes, we'll install a system unless we put something which is called a data logger in with the system. We don't really know how the system is being used. We don't know if people are using it every day necessarily. What's very interesting with the pay-as-you-go technology is with that information, organizations are then able to say, we have 1,000 users, 1,000 people that are using their systems, and this is exactly how they're using it. And what that's doing for them, more on I would say, slightly more advanced social enterprise model, they are then taking that to different funders and demonstrating essentially that people are paying for this, people are using this, and what it does is it de-risks future investments in the technology. So this is again a very big way of how this technology is disruptive. There are I could say millions of solar systems that are installed in areas where unfortunately little is known about them, how they've been used. Pay-as-you-go is changing that. So that's again a very critical aspect of the technology. I will speak specifically about one model which has been applied in Kenya. There could be a very large debate about which program is more successful. There's basically 4 very large organizations in East Africa, some in West Africa, that are really moving forward with pay-as-you-go technology, pay-as-you-go solar, and doing it as a social enterprise. One of those is called MCOPA. So they're an organization which was founded by a group that used to work with, I think it was Safaricom, that was working on something called M-Pesa. And M-Pesa is a mobile money platform, essentially, sending transfers by text between people. You can get a transfer from, your uncle in the UK, or you can send it to your mother in the village in Kenya, and the money's there. She goes to a store, she can actually receive the money. So it was founded by people that were very familiar with that program. And here's how one of their systems works. You have an 8-watt solar panel, which is pretty small. It comes with 2 LED lights. You get an LED flashlight with that as well. Rechargeable radio and adapters for charging a cell phone. Again, one of the very critical parts of the system. And the overall cost of that system is $200. Anyone can offer that system for $200. With pay-as-you-go, the way that MCOPA is implementing this is the user pays an upfront fee of $35, so they can get the system installed for that amount of money, which is less of an upfront barrier. It's less of a smaller sum of money up front. And then what they do for a year is they pay 45 cents a day. They can prepay a week, they can pay for a month if they want, but that's the rate for that service per day. You might say that's not that bad. It's $15 a month. That's pretty reasonable. But for us and our electrical bills, we would probably want more for than 2 lights and a charger on our cell phones. But anyway, as you can see below, based on a survey that was done in Kenya in 2014, what families in the area were actually spending per day on kerosene and charging their cell phones was about 75 cents a day. So again, what Pay-As-You-Go did was took that money which was already there. People have low incomes, whether they're on $2.50 a day, $5 a day, $10 a day, an amount that we would consider difficult to live on. They're still spending that money. So it enabled them basically to invest in that system. And after a year and they own the system, every day they're saving 30 cents, but after a year they're saving 75 cents a day. Again, if you're earning incomes we are here, doesn't mean much. But if you think of that, the amount that people earn relatively, that's very significant. So that's M-KOPA's model. So what are the implications of the changing landscape? As you can see, so this chart takes a look at 2011 to 2015, and it differentiates by different types of products. Essentially what you see is a type of hockey stick, essentially, exponential curve of significant growth. And a large part of this is pay-as-you-go. It's also a lot of very small-scale solar lanterns, which are being sold as well. But again, with these changes that I mentioned before, the different market drivers, this is what's happening in the marketplace. And it's fairly recent. It's not that this has been going on since 2000 or 2002. This is a recent emergence, which again is coupled with the dropping solar PV module prices, which I said that critical time was 2008, 2009. That then led into this. Financing is getting larger. So that's another change that's happened. So the sector now in I believe it's the last 5 years, has attracted about $500 million in private investment. So again, from a space which was dominated by nonprofit organizations before, this is now an area which is starting to be dominated by social enterprises and organizations that are attracting capital. Pico Solar is becoming mainstream. Pico Solar is kind of like that system the ones I showed there: 2 lights, 3 lights, a solar lantern, a small battery, small-scale systems which are the quality of them is becoming better. They're becoming that much more available. It's estimated that 30% of off-grid households in Kenya now have off-grid solar. So it is becoming, it's not something where it's just a few percent of the population. It is becoming that much more widely adopted. And the numbers, I believe it's about, the estimate is that there's 89 million people now globally that are using off-grid solar products. So again, it's growing. There's more and more people are gaining access because of all those market drivers. And again, off-grid solar is advancing just beyond lighting and even cell phone charging. So some of the estimates are that there's, I think it was 7 million solar-powered fans that will be used in India or something like that. But the organization, the name of the organization is Light Up the World. Like I said, we've been working with systems now that can charge cell phones as well and other technology. But systems should really be appropriate to whatever the environment. And if you're in a place where you have 45-degree days, you might want a fan to go with your system as well. So the whole space again is just it's changing significantly. It's called the off-grid lighting sector. It's not just about off-grid lighting even anymore. So what did this trigger within the organization? We were watching this. I remember the first time I had a conversation with a group that was working with Pay-As-You-Go. I think it was 2011, and we just realized that was really going to change things. But at the same time, we weren't in a position as an organization to change overnight. we didn't have the resources to develop things on our own. So we've been cautious, cautiously waiting in the background for an opportunity to do this. But seeing what's happening in the environment, we felt essentially that we had to do something because it was almost an existential question. And we're not an organization that wants to exist for the sake of existing. That is not really interesting to us. So we want to be part of what makes sense for people, and it's very clear that this is what's happening with off-grid lighting, and so we decided that we wanted to move into the space. So it was something that was led by staff, purpose-driven. It's not because the staff thought, oh, well, maybe if we do this, we can end up having nice dividends in some way or something. No, it's still about the objective of the organization. We want to bring more lights to people, and we think this is the right approach to do it, as well as improving the long-term viability for the organization. So, being dependent on donations. I'm the executive director. I'm not the best fundraiser. That's not the part of the job I enjoy. So, it's challenging, especially in an environment right now, to have that model where you're always looking for the next donation just to install the next light. So what we were looking for is how can we extract that and separate that from that need, especially given what's happened with the sector. So we initiated a process with our board of directors that to build a consensus around this change. I'll be honest, it took longer than I thought. We started the process January 2015, and the business plan was approved June of this year. So even bringing the board on board, essentially having them agree to the shift, the idea, and again, not being an overnight shift from one day to the next. A lot of it came down to the details of how are we going to do it, what's the phasing look like, do we have the resources, are we still, does it take away from the operational principles of the organization? But in the end, the board did approve, this approach, which was to separate the organization to some extent into two areas. So one is installation. So we have an office in Peru and Canada. In Canada, we're not going to, Calgary is not where we're going to be selling systems. We're still looking at off-grid systems, so we wanted to pilot this new approach in Peru. So what was approved and what we're going to be doing is offering a wider range of products, essentially. So right now we offer systems that are within a certain range. We're going to be offering pay-as-you-go systems. We're also offering smaller lanterns. We're also offering larger systems, and doing so to a wider audience, essentially. We had projects in the past where we would have funding for 30 or 40 systems in a community, and we've had times where there would be a home where in some parts of Peru, the lifestyle is even semi-nomadic, so people are not there all the time, and under our project criteria, they couldn't qualify for a system because they didn't live there permanently. So with the social enterprise approach, we've basically broadened our definition and saying, well, it doesn't matter if you don't live there year-round, we can still provide you with a system. We're changing pricing principles, and basically this is a change from the subsidy to what we call cost plus. So basically covering our costs plus some additional amount just so that we can cover the operating costs of the organization and grow. Again, not to pay shareholders, not to, there's actually, within Peru, there's restrictions about how we can spend that money. That money has to go back into the social purpose of the organization. So any excess money has to be reinvested in the social purpose. Choosing an area with fairly significant population, which for us it was very important, which was underrepresented in solar. We are seeing some parts of Peru, solar companies starting up now. Again, that was not our objective, to come in as an entity which is, has already, not to compete with something which can be fledgling. So we are choosing an area in Peru where specifically we're not going to be competing with other organizations because the space is not very well developed. And then also another part of the approach is training. We did training already, but quite honestly didn't really realize that we had something that we could provide as a service there. So that's another big part of the shift as an organization, to offer the installation side and the training. So here I'll just fly through this a little bit quickly. This is just showing, our pay-as-you-go, the systems that we're going to be starting to offer. I know the slides will be shown afterwards, so you can take a closer look there if you're interested. And yeah, what has our experience been so far? Well, I wish I could say at the time of this presentation that our office has been up and running for 6 months or a year, and we have all the experiences to share, and it's been a success, and we're going to expand it. Unfortunately, we're not quite there yet. Some of the challenges have been even the resources to develop the business plan. So being an organization that was already really quite busy with other activities, other projects, it took us longer than originally anticipated to complete the business plan. We had some legal constraints, in particular in Peru, that took a while to work around. At the very beginning, we weren't sure what the right legal structure was. We think we found something that works well for us now, which is actually which involves us remaining a charity here. And our entity in Peru, what we had to do was change our social purpose to allow us to sell products. To be honest, we were a little bit surprised that that's all we had to do in the end to be able to do this. But we've done it in a way that still allows us to, operate under, not contravene any regulations, whether in Canada or Peru. Some of the challenges, perceptions about operations. It's an interesting, conversation with people about, charities, what they should do, the approach, and whether or not a change is different in something like this. Some people will hear about, okay, you're charging people, and the first thing they hear when you charge them a certain amount is they think, oh, profit, so you're for profit now, and you're profitable. So we had a lot of time to have a lot of interesting conversations, even with our board of directors, around what is it really that the organization is trying to do, and what's the objective? Lights. Well, what's the way of helping us achieve more? A slightly different model, which is not the subsidy, a little less fuzzy maybe than it was before, but it's about, in the end, it's about results. We want to, be reaching more people through what we do. Other things that are happening in the operating environment, challenges. In Peru, again, with the solar sector, government, other programs, it's fairly uncertain. The sector is growing so quickly. That's been a challenge to really project really far out. And so because of that, we know that we need to be fairly agile in terms of changes that we make. Delays, of course, we had equipment delays in our first order, other delays setting up the office, and other things that have come up. So that's, not that we didn't anticipate that, but that's been another issue that has been come up with the transition. And then organizational culture and HR. I would say this as well. The organization, we're a modest size. We have basically, now 4 staff in Peru. We have 3 staff here. It takes a bit of time to, even in a small entity, to, have those conversations about the way that we operate now, and really distinguish between the different models, and build up the culture, which is a little bit different. Again, the intention is the same, the purpose is the same, but there is some differences there. So I'll conclude by saying, again, we haven't gone through this process full circle, so we don't have all the lessons to share just yet. We would be happy to share those in more detail, once we have had the office up and running for more time and have had more of the experience. But in general, if anyone here is representing a nonprofit, I would just say, and if this is something you've considered, is just to be aware of your environment. This is just because social enterprise is something that a lot of people have spoken about. And nonprofits, charities can sometimes get a bit of a bad rap. It's not appropriate to every particular context. Even if we were in a different country, I would say we might have taken a different decision. In Peru, I think it made sense where we were, and given where the environment was. Another place we might have taken a different decision. Pilot before you commit. So what our board has approved is a 1-year pilot that, if things aren't working, we have an exit strategy, we shut it down, and we will look at what our options are at that point. So it's not to jump into this change from one day to the next and have it be a complete transition. It's best to pilot things. And again, understand your stakeholders, their implications, their interests and the implications of that. So this comes down to who's funding your organization right now. Is this something that is it going to be a challenge to maybe bring them on to a shift in the organization? And then for individuals and people that support nonprofits, I highly recommend, again, I'm biased with working in the nonprofit sector, but be supportive of organizations that want to try something a little bit different. I know Engineers Without Borders has been a great proponent of this, of encouraging failure, which is something nonprofits used to never talk about, but learning, adapting, and a lot of times organizations are really afraid to do that because the fear is that the donors won't support it, their supporters won't support it. And if you are in a very rigid model, you're not going to have good results. So would really encourage people to support any organization that they might fund or follow to do that and what might be appropriate for them. And also focus on results and sustainability. There is for nonprofits a very heavy emphasis on what's your administration expenses, what's your operating G&A essentially, like how much are you spending on your rent and all that. If I were to tell you tomorrow that we went from a nonprofit to a social enterprise, some people might not even care all of a sudden, which is kind of funny. Sometimes people don't care with companies what those expenses are. So I think often there's too much of an emphasis on that and not on results and not on sustainability. I can say as well, years ago when I started with the organization, in a year we would have 10 projects, 10 different countries. We would be distributing more lights than we are right now. Our results were worse. Our sustainability was worse. We didn't have the long-term impact which we did in communities. We, in terms of development objectives, they weren't there really. So on paper, you could look at our financial reports and you'd say, oh, they look great. What happened to them? They look worse now. The results are totally different. So I'd like to end with that. I think I may have gone a few minutes over, but I'm happy to answer any questions you have. Hopefully I've touched on enough, but yeah, you can ask questions about any aspect that I've talked about or something else that I may have missed.
Thank you very much, Christoph. I have a couple of questions. One of them is whether this business model allows you to take advantage of the growing off-grid market here in North America, where you might be able to sell quite similar systems to RV or cabins and that kind of thing, and dedicate any profits that you make there to this kind of thing. And secondly, I'm curious about not so much the business sustainability, I'm curious about that obviously, but about the technological sustainability of it. This is a sector which is changing very rapidly, and I know you're doing training, but I think you'll be wanting to be renewal and new equipment being put in on a fairly short-term basis. So I'm wondering what kind of plans you have in your model for that.
Yeah, so the second question in terms of?
Technological sustainability as things change very rapidly.
Okay, that's a great question. Yeah, so to answer the first question and taking advantage of demand for off-grid systems here, battery backup systems, that's a great point. I would say we have seen definitely more of that on the training side. So we offer, in Calgary at the moment, we offer a basic intro to solar seminar. We also offer some day-long courses, and most people that come to, there's a fee to come, and most people that come to those are people that have an interest in just that, whether it's for their RVs, their cabins. So it's not something which is going to change the finances for the organizations completely, but on the training side, there is definitely an opportunity there. And we are looking at partnering with larger training organizations to bring them in as well to address some gaps. There's quite honestly a training gap in Alberta right now, just because the sector is coming. It's a bit of a shock almost to have the solar market be introduced so quickly. In the scale that it looks like it might be coming up. So we're going to try and play a role there as well. With regards to the second question, yeah, it's a great question. Things are changing very quickly. I mean, with solar modules, the technology has not changed very much, although there's some different emerging PV that may become available, which will change what we're using now, although we don't foresee that. It's unclear when that's going to happen exactly, whether it's 5 years or 10 years out. It's more so on the battery side. So to this point, we use primarily lead acid batteries on our projects, which, you know, some people have been, we've had some criticism about it in the past. Our response to that is when you look at the life cycle assessment, comparing the use of kerosene or candles to systems, even looking with lead acid batteries, there is still an advantage there. And one great thing actually about lead acid batteries is they're one of the most recyclable battery, and most lead acid batteries that are purchased today are actually have some recycled lead in them. So it's more interesting on the battery side, but you know, with the Gigafactory coming online and what's happening with lithium-based battery technologies, we do anticipate that that will change as well. We wanted to continue focusing on the training side because we want, what we don't want in the end, and we see this in some areas, you'll go to a home where a solar panel is sitting not being used. You'll see a battery which is sitting and not being used, or lights. So with the training, we're trying to prepare communities, those systems, you know, that equipment is still functional so that they can continue to use it even beyond its sort of initial life. Great question.
Just curious, as a nonprofit, did you engage the community through volunteering? This community was opportunities with LUTW to volunteer, and whether or not switching from a nonprofit to a social enterprise, if that kind of opportunity engagement is an option.
Yeah, great question. So we volunteering over the last six years has been actually a key part of our funding model. So we will have different corporate partners that provide funding as part of an employee engagement program. We also have partnerships with universities doing something similar where students can go and, you know, learn about renewable energy, but also volunteer. We're under the model that we're, you know, piloting. We're going to continue doing that for at least the next, I would say, 3 to 5 years, and we even have funding agreements to continue that for the foreseeable future. So with this, the way that we're executing the pilot of the social enterprise is in a way where it really tries to do that in more of an isolated location, and we will still run those volunteer programs in a different area essentially. So we'll continue to do that.
Leo, last question, but Christoph will be around for a little bit after we finish up, and his presentation will be up on our website.
Not a question, but a comment. You mentioned you referred to the founder of LUTW, but you didn't mention that it was an engineering professor from the University of Calgary, Dr. Irvine Halliday.
Thank you. Yes. I was hoping that he would be here, but yeah, thank you. Maybe I'll add that, you know, quickly in on that as well. He actually has established his own social enterprise. So to manufacture systems, and we actually are using his lights on a lot of our projects. So yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, it's nice to be, you know, giving this presentation at the UC where the organization was founded.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Christoph. I know he's a humble guy. I'm sure you wouldn't mind too much. It's good that you mentioned him. Christoph, thanks for the presentation. I haven't seen you for quite some time. I'm very glad to see that you guys are not standing still. I just wanted to mention I do some work in Bangladesh. As you know, I was in a small cyclone-devastated off-grid region, and the fellow there that was the pharmacist, kind of makeshift doctor even, he said to me, well, what do I need power for? For light and to charge my cell phone. That's all I wanted. And he wasn't even aware that having a small fridge would allow him to carry a lot of medicines that would help his community. I was just wondering if you've seen any movement from the solar side into that space to try to give refrigeration into some of these small villages.
Yeah, thanks. There is a movement now to develop more direct current appliances. So solar is inherently direct current in terms of the type of electricity that it generates, battery as well as direct current. So there is a real push from different manufacturers to develop more appliances. A lot of it right now is looking at DC TVs, more the entertainment side, but fridges as well. I've spoken to a few groups that are looking at that. I haven't seen very small scale yet that it would be at the household level, but as you say, what would be more suitable in an area where they have power outages, even for a vaccine fridge is, could be significant. But that definitely is an area. There will be a lot more appliances that solar can support that are coming onto the market as well.